This video is brought to you by G Fuel Energy Formula. Use code LKM to get a very nice discount on your next purchase and select your flavor from a huge collection they have. Check it out today and use code LKM. Welcome back, folks. My name is LastKnownMeal and today we're gonna be talking about The Witcher 3 because over the past couple of weeks I've been talking a lot about this game just because of how much I enjoy playing it. And today actually it marks 7 years since The Witcher 3 came out, so today is the 7th year anniversary, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the game and everything which made The Witcher 3 such a big deal when it comes to the RPG community, not just that, but when it comes to CDPR themselves, because initially when The Witcher 3 was coming out, this was the first time where they said you're going to go into an open world, and at that time I was like, okay, how is this going to look like? Because The Witcher 1 and Witcher 2 had semi-open worlds, but they were still somewhat linear if you think about, doing missions, going back to missions, and basically the freedom you have. But then when The Witcher 3 came out, I saw like how much it benefits from the open world scenario where you were able to go on the path. You were actually able to be Geralt of Rivia, a Witcher, not just going from like the main objective and going through everything the story was telling you to do, but rather exploring the world and going through different areas and talking to people who have different issues and problems at hand, and usually those problems would result in a hunting for various kinds of monsters, which is something that Geralt as a Witcher does, and that's something that was really defined in The Witcher 3, where, as I said, you were not just only doing a mission, but you were actually exploring and you were finding all of these things to actually see and experience and do. And one of the best things when it comes to the presentation of The Witcher 3 was definitely how they did quests, because when you look at the quality of those quests, every single one of them has something which makes it interesting. They didn't really want to go into the usual, okay, bring me this, bring me that, and that's about it, but rather every single quest had something which you can tie with something else, and every single one of those quests had a deeper layer of story which you could find, throughout doing that quest, especially because even those smaller quests, like for example hunting for certain monsters, had certain, how would I say, turnarounds where you were actually confronted with a choice to actually see like what kind of a Witcher and what kind of a Geralt you're going to be, because even though this is, it was a predefined character, you still had a good amount of freedom to do whatever you wanted with those stories and with those missions. And also the game has some of the best quests I've ever played, honestly, in any video game, especially the Bloody Baron quest, which I still think to this day is one of the best quests which came out from CDPR. Now, of course, in Cyberpunk you have some quests which come really close to that, and I think some quests even surpass it, but at the same time, Bloody Baron actually showed a lot of people like how questing should be done and how many choices and just different branching paths and decisions you have to make, and all of that is actually implemented with characters who are deep, who are flawed, but at the same time they're not just bad guys or good guys, but they're basically people in this universe, and they have their own set of like personalities which could be considered somewhat of a gray moral area, and you as a Witcher obviously had to thread that needle with them, and your decisions will ultimately see how that quest is going to be finished and how basically the ending of The Witcher 3 is done. And this was definitely like the first game which placed CDPR on the map, because Witcher 1, it was doing alright with sales, Witcher 2 was doing much better, but The Witcher 3 was definitely that game, and especially when Netflix The Witcher Season 1 came out, the game saw a huge boost. Again, I do believe it actually had more players in that peak than it had in the initial peak of when it came out, and you can actually see like the previous investors call they did. The Witcher 3 sold 40 million copies, I think. So when you have a video game which sells so well and a video game which is going to be selling for years to come, you really know you made something special. I think this is a valuable lesson, not just for CDPR, but also for like other developers who want to go into this RPG genre and you want to have an open world segment. That's how you go into it. Of course, there are some minuses that The Witcher has, some pacing issues. I wasn't really bothered with the length of the game. Honestly, if the game was 1,000 hours, I love The Witcher, so I could play it. But with some pacing issues, and maybe the combat could definitely have more depth, but that would be just nitpicking throughout everything else that The Witcher 3 did really well, and something that you know, people will learn to appreciate even more, I think, in the future, because when I talk to people now, you know, they still go back into this game, they still replay it again and again, which is something that I honestly didn't expect for The Witcher 3 that it's going to do. I wasn't expecting so many sales, but it did. It actually like took a lot of inspiration from like those older RPGs, but it also gave a lot of inspiration for future RPG games, and this is definitely going to be a staple in that history when it comes to RPGs, and when it comes to The Witcher as a universe, and when it comes to The Witcher as a franchise. And that's why, of course, you know, the next Witcher game is going to be also one of the most important games CDPR is going to release, and looking at that upcoming Witcher game is going to be interesting to see how well it does compared to The Witcher 3, and on what areas does CDPR improve when it comes to The Witcher as a franchise, when it comes to The Witcher games in general. But one thing which I definitely think is going to be, obviously, and one thing which is going to be a huge plus is obviously, again, that open world for us to explore, because honestly that's the best way you can interact with it and best way to immerse in it, because the lore of The Witcher is vast, it's huge. So in order to cover most things, which I think they actually did in The Witcher 3, you needed to have a lot of side missions, you needed to have a lot of Witcher contracts, and especially going for treasure hunting with gear, that was really cool actually. And also the whole story with Cirilla and everything else which is obviously happening throughout, you know, the main story with the Wild Hunt and everything. It's not just, you know, a Witcher game, it's also a video game of a family, a broken family if you think about it. On one side you have Geralt and Ciri, which have this father-daughter relationship, and then on the other side you have the Witchers in Kaer Morhen, which you don't really have a lot anymore. So they're trying to basically fit together, and they're trying to find something for themselves, and you can actually see that at the end of The Witcher 3, where every single Witcher which was in Kaer Morhen has their own kind of thing which they're gonna be doing after, you know, everything which has happened in that story. And some of the small moments actually the game had just made it insane. So yeah, that's my opinion about the game. I do believe that in the next 7 years this game is gonna be selling, but yeah, it's a lot of that is going to also be interesting to see in the future, and having, you know, The Witcher in Unreal Engine, and how is that all going to look like, especially because now, you know, we're done with Geralt of Rivia. Geralt of Rivia is not going to be the protagonist. Who is it going to be? Predefined character, create your own Witcher. It's gonna be interesting how it does, because when you think about The Witcher, you think about Geralt. So now, you know, things are changing, and sometimes, you know, when you make a leap like that, when you make a decision like that to include someone new, it can go both ways. But I honestly think if they manage to just create what The Witcher 3 was doing in terms of that presentation, questing, and the atmosphere, and the world, and the details, I don't think that's going to be an issue overall. So thank you so much for watching. This is everything for today. I'm gonna try to either upload today or tomorrow the V Rising video, because I'm really enjoying that game, so stay tuned for that. And also check us out on Twitter and Discord, and huge thanks to my current Patreon supporters. This is LKM signing out, and stay classy everyone. Bye bye.